journos back outside the Newcastle United Media Centre, where we've been speaking once again to Jason Tindall ahead of Newcastle United's Premier League match against Crystal Palace at St James's Park on Wednesday night. Obviously, Eddie Howe's health continues to be a big talking point. Newcastle released an update yesterday saying Eddie would miss the Crystal Palace game and the Aston Villa game, but in reality, as Jason Tindall said, there's no real timescale for Eddie Howe's return. So yeah, just the latest on Eddie Howe and what you gleaned from what Jason Tindall had to say.
Yeah, well, look, it's obviously a serious issue being diagnosed with pneumonia. I just think with Eddie Howe's return, it's when he's ready. It's as simple as that. I think the club statement have obviously confirmed that he'll miss matches this week, but as Jason Tindall said, there's no exact time frame when he return. That's totally understandable. Health comes first, and Eddie Howe can only return to work when he's ready, whether that's next week, next month, or next season. Yeah. It's just all about when he feels ready to come back, when he feels 100% to come back. And I think that's the only thing you can look at. I think sometimes things are bigger than football, and Eddie Howe's health is much bigger than football. I think from his point of view, he'll be desperate to get back as quickly as possible. But on this occasion, I just think he should look after himself. And when he does come back, he's 100% again.
Yeah, it's such a hard position for Eddie Howe, who is a workaholic, who puts his body on the line to manage Newcastle United. Really, he's in here first thing, he's out here last thing, and has really put blood, sweat, and tears into managing Newcastle United. And yeah, for him to then be almost told to take a back seat, and he will feel that he has to do that. It must be difficult, particularly when it's such a high pressure role and such an important phase in the season. But you're right, Eddie Howe's health is paramount. That comes first. And in the meantime, Newcastle are in capable hands, as we saw on Sunday with Jason Tindall, Graham Jones, the managerial coaching staff, team, and obviously Newcastle players who won the last 5 in a row in all competitions and doing very well.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing you can give Eddie Howe and his coaches credit for, and the players as well, is they've been so well drilled for so long and they know what they're doing, they know the processes. And on Saturday they didn't really feel Eddie Howe's absence. I mean, he obviously wasn't there on the touchline, but in terms of watching a Newcastle United team, it was very much an Eddie Howe Newcastle United team in the way that they put Manchester United to the sword in the second half. So I think it's one of them. If Newcastle continue to get results, then Eddie Howe will almost be. You almost give Eddie Howe, just keep getting yourself well, Eddie. But if they were to do it, we need a manager back.
Yes.
But of course, in that situation, it's still about whether the manager's ready to come back. But at the moment, they're in a really good place.
Yes.
They've got momentum with them, and as long as that continues, the better.
Yeah, it's the crazy nature of football, isn't it? Where it's like results are so important. It's like, well, it impacts everything almost. But yeah, I think first and foremost, it's just about Eddie Howe getting back fit and Newcastle on the pitch continuing to keep up the good work.
Just one of them with Eddie Howe as well, because he's such an active manager. He's not just a manager that just sits in the dressing room and plays with tactics board. He's literally out there with his whistle, charging out the training ground.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing as
well.
Pneumonia
out to your lungs, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. It's so physically exhausting. I mean, I've never had it before, but having read about it,
I know people who have, and it's not nice. So, yeah.
So he needs to he only needs to return when he's 100%. But in the meantime, he's got coaches, and Jason Tindall keeps making the point, and they've worked each other for 17 years. So he's got coaches that just know everything about his way of work, and they've worked together for so long, and they know everything. So I do think you miss your leader, of course you do, because he's the man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not having there is a massive blow, but they have got people in roles that can help them keep ticking along, if you like, until he eventually returns.
Yes, and I think the only worry I'd have, and that's not to put any pressure on Eddie Howe whatsoever, but Manchester United was very much, do it for Eddie Howe in his absence. Now it's like the initial game has worn off, and now it's like, no, this is your reality for the foreseeable future until any further updates. So it's now up to Jason Tindall to step up, and it's not just like, he is filling in for Eddie Howe, but it's not just autopilot what Manchester United was. He has to actually take the reins and take charge, which I'm sure he will do, as he has done previously before and did on Sunday. So yeah, moving forward, Crystal Palace, big game. and we'll see Joe Willock back.
Yeah, Joe Willock, he's back from concussion protocols. It must have been the 12 days the FA said then.
Yes.
Because it was initial 7 days, but then it was, you know the FA
Yes,
concussion.
a player can return in 7 days if they pass the sort of exceptional protocols where basically you could have a concussion and then the very next day you're probably all right. Joe Willock clearly had lasting effects of a concussion, which 12 days is the minimum. So that ruled him out of Leicester and then Manchester United. But Jason Tindall said he served that protocol time period and he is back available on Wednesday, which, if we're being honest, probably back available for the bench.
Yeah, no, Boss has a bench. I mean, you're going at that Leicester City game, there was no Anthony Gordon.
It was a weak bench,
It
wasn't
really
it?
was.
No disrespect
No,
to the players,
it's,
but
there was,
two goalkeepers.
There was lack of attacking
academy
options.
players, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that gives them real options from the bench again when it didn't look like they did. Anthony Gordon came through unscathed. How long did he get on the pitch again? It was 20 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't an awful lot of time, but he had a few touches, didn't he?
But the important thing is as well that Newcastle have came through unscathed, totally according to Jason Tindall. So there's no fresh injuries to say. Welcome to Joe Willock back. There was an update on Sven Botman as well, Dom.
Yes, Sven Botman back on the grass and ahead of schedule, which obviously you have to take with a pinch of salt. How many times have we heard Sven Botman's close, he's about to return, and then he doesn't? But positive news, after surgery, Sven Botman given 6 to 8 weeks. So it's been 5 weeks since his surgery, so if he's ahead of schedule, could see him back quite soon. But like I say, that's what Jason Tindall said.
Yeah, he was stepping up his recovery last week, wasn't he? He was in Dubai and he went to the NAS Sports Complex, which all the top athletes go. I think Newcastle usually go there when they go over to Dubai, and players like Callum Wilson and Kieran Trippier have used the facility as well. So
state of the art. Yeah,
so it shows that he is closing in. Again, they haven't really missed Sven Botman this season, but if they were to pick up injury in that back line, you almost really need him back. But they've been fortunate in that sense that they've had Fabian Schär and Dan Burn, who, despite their ages over 30s, they've remained fit and available, which is big credit to them. They went through a bit of a lull, I would say, before the Carabao Cup final, but since then they've both been solid, and long may that continue.
Yes, very, very good for Newcastle ahead of Crystal Palace. But we're talking about options and the bench. Joe Willock back on the bench. A regular member of the bench this season, Will Osula, which we were keen, both myself and Jordan, if you watch the press conference, we're keen to ask about, because I know you guys often like to talk about Will Osula, and when we talk about him, you guys like to listen. So I think that possibly inspired our question, because Jason Tindall is pretty much he's the mastermind behind that Will Osula transfer, so keen to get some information from him. So you asked a question, I asked a question. What did he tell you, Jason Tindall, and what can we expect from Will Osula? Yeah,
I'm going to explain my line of attack with Jason Tindall the last couple of days, because we don't get to speak to him, and usually I try to find sort of a couple of quirks that sort of like specific to him. So he's banned on Friday in a day with Osula, because when the day they signed Will Osula, when Eddie Howe spoke to the media, he actually name dropped Jason Tindall as someone that had worked with him at Sheffield United before. So I thought it would be good to hear what Jason Tindall thought about Will Osula when he seen him at Sheffield United, and he was sort of struck by his pace, his ability to run in behind, called him a goal scorer, and compared him to a young Callum Wilson as well, which isn't a bad comparison.
Fair enough.
To say the
least. Young Callum Wilson was a rapid player and a great finisher. I've seen a rapid player from Will Osula. I haven't necessarily seen the finishing so far, other than that great strike against Bromley.
Yeah, apart from that one, but he's still
limited opportunities as well. I haven't seen a lot of him.
You mentioned, asked about how much he developed, and he said, well, it's hard for him given he's behind Alexander Isak, one of Europe's best strikers, and of course he's still, whether you guys agree or not, is still behind Callum Wilson in the pecking order as well. But he spoke really highly of him. Said he's pretty much echoed what we've said about him, really, where you can see he's got attributes. Say good size, pacey, quite strong. But it's just about making that next step from, okay, you've got the attributes, but can you put them into a game and can you start shining? And that's difficult because he hasn't played much this season. I think he's shined in certain games, but I don't think you can
against lower level opposition. That's the problem. I think when we've seen Will Osula in the Premier League, and admittedly it hasn't been a lot, and would you have liked to see more? Yes, but we saw him come on against Leicester, for example, and you can see it's there's still a real rawness to Will
Yeah.
Osula. Whereas Callum Wilson, okay, he's not quite the player he once was. He's missed a lot of football himself, but you almost know what you're going to get from Callum Wilson. He can cause defenders a bit of problems. He needs to do a bit more of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, he's
Wilson, but I think there's a trust there with Callum Wilson that just isn't quite there with Will Osula and needs to be re-established, I think.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, you asked about potential loan spell, and I think he shut that down really.
He said it's something we'll assess in the coming months potentially. He's got stiff competition with the likes of Alexander Isak, potentially Callum Wilson, and potentially even another signing in the summer as well if Newcastle bring in another forward. So if you look at that, where Will Osula's barely been able to get on the pitch when Callum Wilson's been injured, you've got Anthony Gordon back involved now, you've potentially Callum Wilson, Alexander Isak, potentially another forward player. Where does that leave Will Osula? And for me, I think he's a player, he'll be 22 next season. He's not a young lad.
The other games at Premier League level.
Yeah.
For his age as well.
Yeah, and he'll be frustrated naturally, although outwardly he's a very positive, happy-go-lucky sort of
yeah, he is.
wild guy. But I think you're a footballer at the end of the day. You're in a very crucial point in your career where it's like, am I a Premier League footballer? What is my level type thing? Because he hasn't actually been able to prove himself at Premier League level. So where do you go from here? In my opinion, I think Will Osula needs a loan next season.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, I'm sort of saying that with what we said 12 months ago about Lewis Hall, we're having similar conversations.
Yeah.
And I do wonder there is just a point where it clicks. But the only thing I would say about Will Osula and the Lewis Hall difference is Newcastle were crying out for a left back at the time, and then Lewis Hall was the option. We're just waiting for him to click. Whereas Will Osula waiting for him to click, but he's got Alexander Isak and Callum Wilson, which is really hard. It's all dependent on game time, and I just don't see at this moment in time how Will Osula starts games on a consistent basis, which I think he needs.
Yeah, what I'd say on the Lewis Hall Will Osula comparison is Lewis Hall, you could tell technically he was spot on.
Yeah.
It was just teaching him how to defend, which you can teach a defender how to defend. You can't suddenly teach a 21, nearly going on 22-year-old forward, this is how you control shoot, this is how you get in positions. It's a little bit more difficult, I'd like to think. Whereas Lewis Hall is an 18-year-old coming out of academy football, who played a handful of Premier League games, certainly more mouldable into a defender when he had such technical qualities. Will Osula is more a player who has real physical qualities. I think technically I don't think he's necessarily at, certainly not the level Alexander Isak is, as few players are.
But a lot of fans say about trust the process, and Newcastle have signed young players and they've done it and do really well. Two of them name dropped by Jason Tindall, Lewis Hall, which I mentioned. Tine Livramento was another one as well, which I don't think Tine Livramento has ever been at the stage where he needs to prove himself, but he's still a young player coming through, and I think at this moment in time he's probably one of Newcastle's most informed men. Of course that comes from position that he's at left back. You want to see him do that at right back, but just using sort of the transfers that Eddie Howe, the players that Eddie Howe's brought in, young players that have tend to have come good. But as I say, they've signed them in positions where at right back you're waiting for sort of a Kieran Trippier replacement, if you like, long-term replacement. They signed a left back in Lewis Hall, where they need a left back after Dan Burnett got found out at the second half of last season. But then you've signed a striker who you can see has got ability, but needs games, and he's got the world's. I would say he's got the world's best striker ahead of him.
That's the frustration with Will Osula's situation, and I think a lot of fans understand that. Where it's like we've seen the best out of Lewis Hall from him getting a run of games, like you say. Tino Livramento is the same. Even Kieran Trippier coming back in the side, he's enjoying his best run of form this season from playing games consistently. Harvey Barnes in Anthony Gordon's absence, run of games, playing his best football. It's no coincidence that with games regularly, and that trust develops, and then you can develop some form. It's just an impossible situation for Will Osula, because look, get him on the pitch, get him 20 minutes here and there, but Newcastle are fighting for Champions League and have the best striker, like you say, in the world, arguably. It's a tough one, and then like I say, I think it's just a trust thing with Callum Wilson over Will Osula.
It's just all about what happens in the summer. If Callum Wilson stays or they go out and sign on a striker, I do think there's probably room there for Will Osula to go out on loan. But again, it is always dependent on injuries, because you go, well, if you keep Callum Wilson and Callum Wilson gets injured, then Will Osula's out on loan in the Championship. You need Will Osula. So it's all dependent on what summer transfer business they can do. But if they go out and sign a few attacking options, there probably is room to say, look, you need a run of games, which he absolutely does need a run of games. So yeah, I would agree that he needs a loan on the basis of what happens in the summer, dependent.
Yes, but the squad game comes into sharper focus next season with Europe as well. I think Champions League is probably a slightly different ball game, but if it's Europa League or, God forbid, Conference League, which would be very much a worst case scenario now, given the position Newcastle put themselves in, then I think Will Osula, you go, well, he's probably getting 6-7 games in that competition. So yeah, I think it depends on a few things, but for me, I think Will Osula would possibly benefit from getting out on loan, scoring a few goals, because at the moment, like, he's not going to get the opportunities at Newcastle. It's been made clear, as much as you guys and as much as us at times want to see Will Osula, it's been made abundantly clear from Eddie Howe, from the form of Wilson-Isak, that that's not going to happen, certainly this season.
Yeah.
What happens in the summer, he'll get an opportunity in pre-season. Can he prove himself? And we'll wait and see from there. But yeah, that was the thinking behind our questions, I think. We're like Will Osula. Hope he has a great career at Newcastle. But yeah, I think he's one player who just needs games.
Agreed.
One way or the other.
Agreed.
So yeah, on that note, we'll have a word from our sponsors and see you in a couple of minutes. Comply IT Limited. Worrying about disposing of your old IT equipment? Don't be. Comply IT handle everything. Secure collection, detailed tracking and certified data destruction. That's Comply IT Limited. We've also got Mitigate. Mitigate enhances workplace mental health, helping businesses stay compliant, reduce absences and unlock higher productivity, creating healthier, happier teams. And of course, our OG sponsors, Four Rivers Financial Planning. Four Rivers Financial Planning offer holistic financial advice for all stages of life, ensuring your plan remains robust and adaptable in the ever-changing world we live in. So yeah, we're back. That wasn't a couple of minutes, but I hope you enjoyed the ad break, and links to them in the description below. So yeah, moving on, Jordan. Crystal Palace, St James's Park tomorrow night. We'll be there. Hopefully speaking about another win. Newcastle moving up to third in the table, fingers crossed. A result would do it, just a draw, but a win puts you 5 points inside the Champions League places with 6 games to go. It's Newcastle's to lose at that point if they do indeed get a win.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be a much tougher game what they had on Sunday. I'll guarantee that. Because you can get up for the Manchester United games. I mean, Manchester United are a team that are 14th in the Premier League, but historically are a big name, big atmosphere it brings, whereas Crystal Palace are a better team, but it falls into the bracket of Fulham, Bournemouth and Brighton. Results have had a change in spot the season where they've lost, and it's sort of that similar level of opposition where Newcastle have really struggled to get to grips with this campaign. So it's a real tough one tomorrow for me. I think if they can get through that one, as you say, they put themselves in a really good position, but it's not a banker by any stretch, as I say. I think Aston Villa will be the toughest of the 3 games this week, but Crystal Palace are a very, very good side. I think Jason Tindall, there's stats out of him. I think only lost 2 of the last 15
away games,
which is
had a tough start to the season and bounced back really well.
Well, one of the worst games I've ever seen was that one when Newcastle played. But both teams have improved since then. Definitely improved since then. I'm just thinking Newcastle probably needed a couple of games after when that was at Brentford defeat when the season sort of turned. It wasn't the Crystal Palace game. Whereas Crystal Palace have come on really strong and have done what Crystal Palace teams usually do and finish the season strong, where they've had such a bad start and then they think they're going to get in the European places but just fall short. But of course they've got an FA Cup semi-final to look forward to. So know that they're a really good side, and it's a cliche, but Newcastle will have to perform really well tomorrow if they're going to get a result.
Yeah, Newcastle named the same starting lineup 5 games in a row. Will it be 6?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's one of them where games this week you'd probably wise to rotate, but I don't think there will be rotation tomorrow night. I don't think they're blessed with too many rotation options without hurting the structure of the team. Whereas they've got a real good continuity at the minute, where and a real understanding with each other where
Yeah.
I just think they'll roll with it.
Yeah. I think the one change you'd possibly make, though not now, would be Anthony Gordon coming in for Harvey Barnes. But Harvey Barnes, I mean,
Exactly.
3 goals and 2 assists in his last 4 Premier League games. He's made himself almost undroppable, hasn't he?
Yeah, I don't think any players who played Sunday will want to drop out tomorrow, right?
No.
I think it's the Saturday game which is tricky, but can you make many changes for an away game at Aston Villa? They might have to find a way to do so, but I just think momentum's with Newcastle. The players will want to play, the opportunity to go third in the Premier League. I think we'll go and change and then reassess on Saturday, which is still a tough game, but they might find themselves in a position where they have to rotate on Saturday, whereas I don't feel like, at this moment in time, I don't feel like they have to rotate now.
Yeah. Fingers crossed Joe Linton doesn't get a yellow card.
Yes.
That's the one thing that could force rotation, in addition to any injuries, which hopefully won't happen either.
Is there a loophole with Joe Linton?
He could get a red.
So
I mean, he'd still miss Villa,
Yeah.
but there is we saw with Anthony Gordon last season where he was on the verge of a 2-match ban for getting 10 yellow cards, ended up getting a second yellow card against West Ham, which then reduced his bookings to 8. He avoided a 2-match ban, had a 1-match ban, and then was back after 1 game. It was genius stuff from Anthony Gordon, whether intentional or not. So if Joe Linton's on a yellow card and he's going to miss the Aston Villa game and the Ipswich game, he's better off getting a red card, getting a second yellow, I should say, and then just missing the Aston Villa game.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's a loophole. So yeah, Joe Linton would essentially go from getting 10 yellow cards, so then if he got a second yellow card or get a red card, his yellow card count would go back to 9.
Yes.
And
then
he would avoid a 2-match
yes.
ban, but he would get a 1-match ban for getting 2 yellow cards in
Yes.
1 game.
Silly. So yeah, the 32nd game of the season is when the 10 yellow
Yeah.
cards situation gets wiped. So if Joe Linton avoids a yellow card against Crystal Palace, he's basically fine for the rest of the season.
Yeah, unless he went on an absolute rampage, which is.
But then there'd only be 6 games left, so he'd
Yeah.
maybe miss the start of next season. But I don't think that's a thing. So so all good if Joe Linton keeps his discipline in check, and if he doesn't, then he has to really go one step further and get a second yellow card. That's our team talk to you, Joe Linton. If you're on a booking, get another.
I hope Jason Tindall has communicated this with us. Joe Linton, if you get a yellow card, you make sure you get your second before the end of the game.
We'll sub him off and he just takes his time.
Exactly, It's
Go down naughty territory if we start talking like that. But yes, that is the situation. Newcastle, huge game against Crystal Palace tomorrow in their push for Champions League qualification. We'll be there back at St James's Park with Liam Kennedy, our third Geordie journo, discussing what will hopefully be another Newcastle United win, 6 in a row. Let's hope.
Fingers crossed.
So if you like what we do, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell for all your latest Geordie Journos content. We'll see you on Wednesday night. Cheers.